Sean.
What's up?
It's Airbnb, dude.
No, I don't own this.
How'd you get the landlord to put it on Airbnb?
That's a really good question. There's a few steps to getting a landlord to say yes to letting you Airbnb a property that's not yours. And actually, surprisingly, 2025 might be one of the easiest times in history to do it, by the way. So with that said, my name is Sean Rakijic. I've got about 150 properties that I don't own on Airbnb. And this video is going to teach you how I and you can get a landlord to say yes. So like the video, follow along as I prep this Airbnb for show, and let's get you your first Airbnb property. Come on over, let's talk. So first, I know what you're thinking. We should address the thing that everybody likes to say all the time, which is subletting's illegal, right? Well, not really, and yes at the same time. Subletting is in your contract. Landlord says no subletting. But did you know that every landlord uses the same contract and they don't know what's in a contract? They don't know half what's in there. So subletting is this agreement that you won't become the landlord. You can get a landlord to change the contract and say, you know what? Sure, you can sublet, and you do what's called a lease addendum, which is a little one-page document. A lease addendum, it's a little document. It'd say whatever you want it to say. And as long as you, the landlord, sign it, it can change the lease that it's attached to. And the one thing you want it to say is, landlord will allow us to sublet, landlord will allow us to list on sites like Airbnb, landlord will allow us to make money. It's very easy. I've got a whole video on that, but let's move forward and actually get into how you can make some money, because the lease part is such a groaner, guys. So let's talk about the hard part first, because you guys need to know if this is going to be right for you. You have to be cool with one thing, which is you have to be a bit persuasive. You have to get a landlord to say yes, and that's kind of like sales and prospecting. And I will tell you, yes, I have an unfair advantage. I sold newspaper subscriptions, that's how old I am, inside of grocery stores, and I had tons and tons of rejection, hundreds of people a day. And I was so used to rejection that by the time I got into short-term rentals talking to landlords, this was like fish in a bucket back then. But what I have for you, because selling newspapers was viciously hard, is I've got sales techniques that will guarantee you success with landlords. Guarantee you success. So if you wanted anybody to teach you how to convince a landlord to say yes, I'm your boy, Old Man Newspaper Sales. That's a funny name, but we're sticking with it. And if you're asking if sales is right for you, if you've never done it before, I want to tell you a story about when I used to hire salespeople with zero experience. I had one interview question that I'd ask people, which is, if you were going to imagine some one person, I want you to tell me the first person you think of when I ask you a question. Tell me who you think of. Salesperson. And now, give me a name. What would happen is the people I interviewed would give me all sorts of random names. It could be Mickey Mouse, Abe Lincoln, Jordan Belfort, Grant Cardone, the Monopoly Man. And then I'd say, that's interesting. Tell me why. And that's where we start to get the answer. I want you to ask yourself now, who did you just think of when I said, tell me the first person you think of when you said salesperson? It could be your uncle. It could have been anybody. Now, why did you think of that? Why that person? And if you're going to be honest with me right now, you're probably going to say, well, the person was really resourceful and adaptive. The person never took no for an answer. The person would do whatever it takes. The person was a real slime bag, right? Whatever your answer is gives you your natural predisposition to selling. If you think that sales is bad, you would have gave me a bad person. If you think that sales is good, you give me a good person. Now, if you're on the good side, great. You don't have any extra work to do but to start learning sales. If you chose a bad person, you have a moral disconnect from the act of selling and prospecting. And that's the part that we want to work on, okay? I want to tell you that everything is sales. Social media is sales. In a way, I have to sell you this video, right? You're going to have a thumbnail and title you clicked on, right? I have to sell you that. And it could be for your benefit, right? If this video is valuable, you go, great, I'm so glad I clicked on this video. If the video is not valuable, you go, what a sleazebag, clickbaited me into that video. I've been on both sides of that fence, by the way. So if we can get you to believe that sales is kind of a natural thing that happens, right? You tell a good story, you're selling. If you act more kind to somebody than they deserve to be, you're selling. You're selling them on the fact that they're a valuable person or something, right? And so you are already selling every day just in ways that you deem are morally acceptable. So accept that. Let's talk about the anatomy of a sale as it pertains to getting your first Airbnb property, okay? There's a funnel. Every salesperson talks about the sales funnel. Well, the sales funnel for us is we need to find a landlord. We need to talk to that landlord. We need to build trust, rapport, confidence, value, whatever, with that landlord. Bunch of words you can use. And then we got to get that landlord to make a decision to work with us. It's kind of like a 4-step process. And at the end of it, you get a lease that says you can Airbnb. That looks about right. Where do we find landlords? Tons of places. But this is 2025, so it's not like fish in a barrel like it used to be. The quickest way to find a landlord that'll tell you no is on Zillow. You know what Zillow is, right? That's probably where you would have thought of going, was to Zillow. Now, in smaller markets, any of you who are in anywhere rural that's not Miami, New York, Chicago, LA, Dallas, Zillow could actually still work, right? There's this, I guess, concept of like evolution in all industries, right? Prospecting, where we prospect, who we sell, can evolve too. And what you'll find in places like Miami or Dallas is that there's so many people who want to do Airbnb that the volume of people searching for properties is higher, and they all go to the most obvious place, which is Zillow. And so you'll get a building that's fresh on the market for rent, and you'll have 20 people call the landlord or the real estate agent going, oh, I want an Airbnb. And so that's why you'll see so much rejection. And that's why it can be so disheartening to do Airbnb in a big city, is because you feel like everybody knows what's going on and they don't want to do it. But let me tell you the secret. Everybody does know what's going on. That's okay. But they don't want to do it because your pitch sucks. It's just boring. And everybody before you has given a bad pitch too, if you think about that, right? So if 10 people call the landlord with a groaner of a pitch, and now you're trying to pitch a landlord with a groaner of a pitch, they're going to go, yeah, I heard this before. That sucks. I'm out, right? So instead, we're going to call a landlord. We're going to have a different bit of an approach, which we'll get to later at the end of the video. But I just want you to know that the rejection you see is a byproduct of how bad the sales process is and how many people are bad at sales. Okay, follow me over here. Got to hang this painting over here. So places that you can find landlords that are completely new and fresh for 2025 is one, Facebook groups. Find Facebook groups with landlords, builders, fix and flip guys, wholesalers. And you're going to actually like mention that you're a company that's looking to rent multiple properties. That actually works. You can go Facebook Marketplace, and you can work with real estate agents. By the way, I'm going to tell you about that in a second. Could you put that over here and help me with this quick? Thank you, sir. All right. So real estate agents, I would have told you years ago to hide the secrets of what we do from real estate agents. Yeah, you can grab that back. What do you guys think? Isn't that cool? Yeah. All of these I did, by the way. This is a multi-million-dollar Scottsdale property that was just a little too ugly to make thousands a night. And so one thing that's hyper luxury is oversized art pieces. And this would sell if I was famous for $25,000. I'm not famous, kind of, not as an artist. So that won't sell for 25. But nobody knows that. So all of these pieces of art here give the illusion that there's $80,000 of fine art in the property. So let's talk about real estate agents. 10 years ago, I would have said, don't tell a real estate agent what we do, because they'll go to their buddies and go, dude, did you hear this new thing? It's called Airbnb arbitrage or rental arbitrage. You can get properties you don't own and put them on Airbnb. I just talked to a guy that's doing it. You should get into this, bro. If you can't buy any more houses, do this. But everybody knows about this and everybody has an opinion. So we need to get real estate agents to trust us specifically in a world where they've heard about this enough, and now they, at their discretion, will tell landlords about us. Right? So what I like to do is I like to call a property, and if a real estate agent picks up the phone, I'll say, hey, John, my name is Sean. I own a company that does furnished accommodations, relocations, short-term rentals, the whole lot. And I'm looking for multiple properties. And I see your property on Cherry Lane. This is a great property, by the way, beautiful. But before I get into that, I need many properties. And because I like your Cherry Lane property, I'm assuming that you've got a lot of inventory I may like. Can I meet with you and look at everything you've got? And you kind of see what all you have in your portfolio. And I'll tell you about our business model, and we can see maybe which landlords will be a good fit for. And what happens with that is the real estate agent doesn't think about you and the one landlord at Cherry Lane. Because the landlord at Cherry Lane, if he's like, that guy will say no, he'll gatekeep you. But now instead, if you talk to the real estate agent about just any and all properties, the real estate agent becomes opportunistic and goes, wait, I could sell like 10 properties. I can move 10 leases with this one guy. I'm down to hear what he has to say. I don't know what landlords will say yes, but real estate agents that do apartment locating are in sales. They know the law of averages. So they know that some landlords will say yes. And that's what we're trying to invoke with a real estate agent. So I do think that real estate agents and apartment locators are maybe the most powerful way to find properties right now as long as you still pitch the landlord eventually. The real estate agents can give you kind of a warm lead in, especially places like Philly. I couldn't get a property calling the buildings, but the moment I found a good local real estate agent that knew the owners, his warm handoff, all of the landlords were willing to talk to me where they weren't talking to me when they did not know me. It's almost like the mafia. The real estate agent got me in. So put that in your back pocket and use it. And also like the video. See what else here. Further along, my friends, not just real estate agents, not just Facebook groups, you can drive for dollars for rent signs. And what's really funny is there's still landlords that just don't like to put stuff on the internet. So I'll find something by any means, either looking up apartments on Google Maps or a Zillow listing, God forbid, Facebook Marketplace, Facebook groups, whatever. And I'll schedule my meeting to meet the landlord because we always want to meet them in person. We'll talk about that more in a second. And so I drive to meet the landlord in person. And then I'll drive around the neighborhood and look for rent signs around that area because I already did comps on that neighborhood. I wanted to know that a property was going to make money. I don't just pitch anybody. So I did a little bit of market research, which I'm going to give you a video on market research at the end of this video. Don't worry, I've got you covered there. We do market research to find out where we want to have a property. We get the landlord to meet us at the property. And because I know I want something in that neighborhood, I'll drive the neighborhood and look for rent signs. And that way I'll call those landlords and go, hey, John, I just drove by your property in Cherry Lane. It looks great from the outside. I'm looking for a few homes in this neighborhood. I have a furnished accommodations company. We do like relocations, short-term rentals, the whole lot. And I'd like to meet you at your place, take a look at the inside, make sure it works for us, and tell you more about our business. And so I can meet you tomorrow, maybe even after lunch today if you're free. I'll bring you a coffee when works for you. I like to offer a landlord, I'll bring you a coffee. It's just like a thing that generates like a little bit of reciprocity. It's my little gambit, my sales gambit. It makes me seem like a nice guy, right? They have no clue. Sucks to be them. But I get them to meet me in person. So the one meeting allows me to drive the neighborhood. I'm already spending the gas to get there. And then I can have multiple meetings on the back end. That's my favorite way to prospect houses. Absolutely is. Apartments are a little bit different, but in a way there's a benefit to them. You don't have to be as good at pitching to do apartments. I bet you weren't expecting to hear that, were you? Let me tell you all about that. So apartments are bureaucratic, I guess would be the word I'd like to use for it. We want to get an apartment to trust us. And to get an apartment to trust us is really about just not having red flags. Apartments are also very often trained. Don't mind me. I'm just here to break stuff. I think I need to make this higher. What do you guys think? This is to be higher, right? Apartment complexes are trained to tell us no. That's what they're there for. They're like, yeah, we don't do that. Every building, every apartment complex that I work with, they at first said, we don't do that. That's totally standard, okay? I'm going to do this don't try this at home, guys. But the truth, what gets a building to tell us yes is that they see us as a business that is discerning, that won't take in bad guests. Sometimes a track record is important, but that isn't always important. But a building goes, is this guy just some dude trying to do Airbnb, or is this an actual company? Because the truth is, these buildings have worked with corporate housing companies for decades. And if you think about it, we're very similar to corporate housing companies. And I actually like to use this in my script. It's called sales by analogy is what I call it. So sales by analogy is essentially where we start by explaining that we're corporate housing, but there's a few things different about us. That's the analogy. We're mostly corporate housing, but very little is different. And I have a script that is beautiful for this for apartments, but I won't ever teach it publicly because my students still slap with that script and I don't want to flood the market with my script. Sorry, guys. But the moral of it is if you get a building to meet you under the premise that you're a corporate housing company and you can effectively, as a company, show that you're like a business, that you've got good executive presence and your script can get them to understand what you do, but also see that as not very different than corporate housing, they'll tell you yes, a ton. They'll tell you yes so much. Bum, 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 bum. Look, I didn't fall. Proud of me? How about a like for that? And the main difference between pitching apartments and pitching landlords is landlords still don't understand completely what we do, right? So with apartments, the reason why it's easier, you do your script, you do your tour, you ask for the application. If we can get the building to give us an application after we've told them all about our business, there's an implied agreement already here. They're a whole business too. They can't play dumb. And in my script, we build for that. My students, they get the lease agreement and we start to negotiate the stuff at the end, but it's very, very assumptive. Like working with apartment complexes, we're highly assumptive because we're holding them accountable for being a whole business and understanding what's going on. Now, with landlords, we have to hold their hand and we have to actually color stuff in crayon, kind of like these colors, right? And so with the landlord, when we color in crayon, oh, Riley, who's behind the camera, I just told him I did hacky sack professionally for a while back in college. He's about to see what I mean. See that? How about that? Use the foot. So with the landlord, after we do our pitch, still the script is private, we'll end the script with, so what questions do you have for me? And that pivot, that change, instead of putting pressure on the landlord to say yes after your script, you go, hey, here's the script. Let me do Airbnb. And what do you think, John? And then John's like, man, that's a little overwhelming. That's a lot of new information. I'm confused. No, that's what John will say. But if you say script, pitch, fancy, and go, so what questions do you have for me, John? John goes, man, I got a bunch, actually. First question, bang. And if you can answer questions for 10 or 15 minutes, you plan for that, then after 10 or 15 minutes, you can see John's body language change to something a little bit more like open-minded, like Sean Solo. And then after he's comfortable, you ask for the sale. And that's how we get our first Airbnb property. Now, if you want to know the best locations to Airbnb, I've got a video on the 20 best markets for the little guy. Easy to start. And if you want to learn market research to then get down to the very best individual properties, I've got a whole playlist on market research here for you. Watch those. And ask me your sales questions down below. If you want to learn sales, I know my scripts are private, but one of my mentorships to learn sales that includes my scripts is $30 a week, $30. And you get weekly coaching from one of my sales coaches. I've got 7 coaches in my Cracking Superhost program, and one of them, who specializes in sales, does our $30 weekly sales mentorship. So with that said, thank you for being here at the end. I'm gonna get back to making this $1 million property slap, and subscribe if you wanna see this thing when it's done, by the way. As always, my friends, I'll see you on the other side.